Cockroach Janta Party. Nearly 20 million Instagram followers in under a week. People protesting in cockroach suits across 5 states. And a 30-year-old former political strategist broadcasting from Boston telling The Guardian this movement will change the political discourse in India. And looking at the comments, it is clear that so many of us are already thinking exact same thing. Finally, something is actually shifting. I understand the feeling, I really do. But that feeling is not analysis though. And the thing about the feeling is they do not win seats. So before we get into whether CJP is real, whether the followers are bots, or whether the founder is serious about the movement, let me save you some time. None of that matters. Because the problem is not the movement, the problem is the conversion. In India, viral mobilization rarely becomes electoral change. And when it does, the result is rarely what the founders originally hoped for. Over the next few years, I think CJP is very likely to demonstrate this to us all over again. Now, we need to be precise about what CJP is. CJP began with a satire. The cockroach image is a satire. The language is a satire. The style is a satire. Even their own website plays with that tone. But underneath the satire, there is a real political ambition. Their mission is not just to make jokes. Their mission is to build a party for young people who feel written off by the system. So the right way to understand CJP is this. It is a satire on surface, but political ambition underneath. And that is why it matters, because the moment satire starts organizing people politically, it stops being just a meme. It starts entering the same arena as every other political party, and that arena is brutal. The founder Abhijit Dipke is not some innocent outsider who has never seen politics from inside. He has worked around politics before, has seen how campaigns work, and have seen how movements are built. That makes this more interesting because Dipke probably understands the danger better than most of his followers. A movement can begin with pure anger, but to survive politics, it needs money, people, candidates, discipline, offices, lawyers, accounts, compromises, and a hierarchy. That is the devil's bargain. To enter the system, you have to become an organization. Once you become an organization, the system starts changing you. That is the real test for CJP. The attention is the easy part now. They already have the attention. The real test is what that attention turns into. And we have seen this movie before. The closest example is AAP. AAP matters here because AAP is not a failure case. AAP is the best case scenario. A movement became a party, a protest became a government, they won Delhi, then they won Delhi again in a landslide, and then won Punjab. So, if someone wants to say movements can become power, AAP is the strongest example. It's a fair assessment. But now, look at what success did to AAP. The founding bench did not survive. People like Prashant Bhushan and Yogendra Yadav were pushed out within a few years. The party that was born from anti-corruption politics ended up fighting major corruption allegations on its own. Its top leaders spent years dealing with arrests, courts, bail hearings, investigations, and legal calendars. And then, years later, one of its most polished young faces, Raghav Chadha, crossed over with MPs to the BJP. You can have your own opinion on every one of these events. That is not the point. The point is bigger. AAP proved that a movement can win elections. It also proved what elections do to a movement. Elections force a movement to choose candidates, remove dissenters, raise money, defend power, make alliances, and manage ambition. At that point, a movement is no longer just a moral argument. It becomes an operating machine, an organization. That is why AAP matters here. Not because AAP achieved nothing. AAP achieved a lot. It changed Delhi politics, built a welfare model, and proved that a new party could break through. But that is exactly why the warning matters though. If even the best case movement gets pulled into the machine, what happens to CJP? To answer that, we need to understand the basic difference between a protest and election. This is the part we often miss. A protest and an election look similar from a distance. Both involve crowds, slogans, and anger, but they work in completely different ways. A protest is built around a no to corruption, no to injustice, no to a particular law, no to the way things are. That kind of anger can be powerful. It can shake governments. It can force attention, embarrass governments, make the system respond. But an election is not built around a no, though. An election needs a yes. Yes to this candidate, yes to this party, yes to this coalition, yes to this local leader, yes to this particular trade off, which is much harder to do because people can agree with you on what they hate, but that does not mean they agree on who should govern them. That is the bridge CJP has to cross. It has to turn a viral veto, a no, into an actual vote, which is yes. And before we even reach the three formidable walls, Indian political machine stands up, CJP's own manifesto shows how wide that gap still is. Now, let us look at what CJP actually says it wants. 5 demands. 1. No Chief Justice should get a Rajya Sabha seat even after retirement. 2. Arrest the Chief Election Commissioner under UAPA if the legitimate vote gets deleted. 3. 50% reservation for women in Parliament and the Cabinet. 4. Cancel the media licenses for Ambani and Adani. 5. Ban defecting politicians for 20 years. And look at this honestly. This is not a program for government. It is a list of punishments. And the biggest absence is unemployment. That is what triggered the movement in the first place. The anger came from unemployed youth being called cockroaches. But the unemployment is not in the manifesto, not as a demand, not as a plan, not even as a sentence that matters. Because unemployment is not solved by anger alone. Even the richest economies in the world, including countries that can print reserve currencies, still struggle with creating jobs. So the question is not just, are young people have a right to be angry? Of course they have. The question is, what would CJP actually do? The trade-offs that they would make, what industries would they prioritize and how do they achieve employment? What skills would they fund? What would they cut to pay for from budget? That is where the protest becomes policy, a plan, and CJP has not reached that point yet, clearly from their manifesto. Take the defection demand. A 20-year ban sounds satisfying, but that's not a policy, is it? It is a punishment. A stronger version would be simple. If a politician switches parties, they lose the seat by default and face the voter again because voter chose the party symbol, not just the individual alone. That protects the voter without turning politics into a revenge system. That is the difference between anger and design. The Ambani and Adani demand has the same problem. Big businesses owning media is a legitimate concern in India. They should not be doing that. I agree with that. But cancelling licenses is just a slogan. These companies employ a huge number of people directly or indirectly. So the real question is harder. How do you reduce media concentration without creating chaos? How do you protect editorial independence without giving the state a new weapon to silence media houses it dislikes? That is the policy question. And CJP does not answer it yet. So the manifesto reveals something important. CJP knows what is it against. It does not yet show what is it standing for. That is why right now it is still a protest dressed as a party. Protests matter in democracy, but protests are just vetoes. But election needs votes. And once you try to turn that veto into a vote, the 3 walls they will need to climb over appear. Geography, bureaucracy, and identity. The first wall is geography. This is the most basic problem. India does not have elect Instagram accounts as election policy. India elects MPs and MLAs from specific seats. That means National anger, which is distributed, is not enough. It has to become local power concentrated in constituencies. One follower in Mumbai, one in Bangalore, one in Patna, and one organizing it from Boston might look powerful online or on Instagram. But none of that actually helps you to win booth number 143 in Bankipur. Our first past the post system does not reward national noise by default. It asks one brutal question: can you win this exact seat against this exact candidate with this exact caste equation? That is where the viral movements usually collapse. Because anger spread across the country is not the same thing as power concentrated in a constituency. Now, compare that with a serious election machine. Take the BJP's booth model. The party does not just think in terms of followers, it thinks in terms of specific voters. In many places, the organization works through a Panna Pramukh system, a worker responsible for one page of voter list. Not 1 million people online, just one page. Maybe 30, 40, maximum 50 voters. That worker knows who has shifted the house, who's angry, who needs persuasion, who needs transport, who may not turn up on the election day, or who needs a reminder on the polling day to arrive at the booth. That is the difference. CJP has the attention, the established mission has the voter list, the local workers, and the turnout discipline. In elections, that difference matters more than online reach. And that is the only first wall, because even if CJP solves the geography, even if it chooses the right seats, finds the right local issues, and it still runs into something internet is terrible at handling: delay. Politics does not move at the speed of outreach. It moves at the speed of forms, committees, approvals, accounts, offices, and waiting rooms. That is the second wall: time and bureaucracy. This is where the viral energy gets tested. A meme can travel across the country in 1 hour. A political party takes months, sometimes years to build. CJP can trend today, but to contest seriously, attention is not enough. It needs a legal structure, a constitution, office bearers, audited accounts, district committees, lawyers, and people who can be held responsible when something goes wrong. That is when a movement stops being a vibe and becomes an institution. And this is not optional. To appear on a ballot, CJP has to deal with the Election Commission. It has to survive the paperwork. It has to wait. That waiting period is dangerous for online movements because internet energy decays fast. Today, people are excited. Next month, another issue crops up. Next year, another outrage replaces it. By 2029, when the general elections are, the original momentum may already feel really old. That is why time kills movements. Movements peak emotionally, but elections happen on calendars. And calendars are not kind to hype. So no, you cannot meme your way onto a ballot. At some point, someone has to fill the forms, build the district unit, find the candidates, raise the money, and answer the phone when the volunteer gets bored. That boring work is politics. And the system knows this. It does not always need to crush a movement. Sometimes it only needs to outweight it. But suppose CJP survives the waiting. Suppose it builds the organization. There is still one wall left. And that wall is the hardest one: identity. And I do not mean identity as emotion. I mean identity as protection. This is where the middle-class internet politics often misreads Indian elections. Online, people talk about clean governance, anti-corruption, new politics, better democracy. All of that matters. But for many voters, politics is more immediate. Who helps when the ration card is stuck? Who gets the road fixed? Who can call the police station? Who can move a welfare file? That is why a voter may support the local strongman, not because they are stupid or brainwashed, but because that person can get things done. Clean politics sounds good, but if your gas subsidy is stuck, your hospital bed is unavailable, or the local officer is ignoring you, you look for access. That is the real local machine, and every serious political party has to deal with it. CJP will have to answer the same question every serious party faces. When a voter needs help, who from CJP will show up on the ground? That is where the identity stops being a slogan and becomes real politics. AAP faced this exact test. It began with anti-corruption, but to hold power, it had to move into delivery, water, electricity, pollution, schools, clinics, buses. That is not an accident. That was the survival. CJP will face the same test. People may share the memes, they may like the movement, but on election day, the question becomes very simple. What can you do for my life here in this place right now? If CJP cannot answer that specific question, the machine wins. So here is where I land. CJP is not meaningless. It's not a joke. It has clearly touched something very real. The anger is real. The frustration is real. The youth energy is real. And the satire works because people already feel insulted by the system. But the Indian political machine is not scared of jokes. It's not even scared of anger. It is scared only when anger becomes organization. That is the road CJP has barely started walking. The machine will not panic. It will respond the way system actually responds. Paperwork will slow them down. Structure will expose their weaknesses. Funding will test them. Ambition will pull people away from the party. Mistakes will be punished. And over time, the internet will move on. And if CJP survives all that, the final danger begins because survival may require them to become exactly what they are protesting against. That is the brutal choice. They can die as a beautiful viral movement right now, or they can live long enough to become another machine or make the existing machine fatter. Honestly, this is one of those things I would love to be wrong about. In fact, I'm super excited to see something like this, almost a movie like. I want CJP to prove that a young movement can enter Indian politics without losing its soul. I want to see a movement beat structure instead of getting absorbed by it. But looking at India's political history, looking at AAP's recent example, and looking at how elections actually work, I do not think the odds are in their favor. So, I'm putting this on the record now, not to dismiss CJP, but to measure it honestly. Because in a few years, we will know what this was. Maybe it was a meme, maybe it became a movement, maybe it became a party, or maybe it became another reminder that Indian politics does not collapse because a movement goes viral. It changes only when the movement becomes organized power. And that is the test CJP has not yet passed. So let me leave you with that note. If you have liked the random guy's ramblings, please hit that like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, dig deeper.